I was 23 years old in the spring of 2008, when my world collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane. The morning started like any other Tuesday in my small apartment in Portland, Oregon. I remember the rain tapping against my window, creating those intricate patterns that always reminded me of my childhood, when Dad would trace similar designs on fogged glass during our weekend drives. Little did I know that by sunset, the man I thought I knew better than anyone would become a complete stranger to me. The call came at exactly 11:47 a.m. I know because I was staring at my laptop screen, procrastinating on a marketing report for the advertising agency where I worked as a junior copywriter. Mom's voice was different that morning, strained, like she'd been crying for hours. "Sarah, honey, I need you to come home. There's something about your father we need to discuss." The way she said, "your father," instead of "Dad," sent chills down my spine. In our family, formality was reserved for the gravest of situations. The drive from Portland to Salem felt eternal. Every mile marker seemed to mock me as I replayed Mom's words in my head. The Oregon countryside blurred past my Honda Civic's windows, but all I could see was Dad's face from our last dinner together 3 weeks prior. He had seemed distracted, checking his phone more than usual, but I attributed it to work stress at the construction company he managed. How naive I was to think that a man who built houses for a living could not construct elaborate lies to hide an entire second life. Mom was waiting on the front porch of our modest 2-story colonial home, the same house where I'd grown up believing in fairy tales and happy endings. Her auburn hair, usually perfectly styled, hung limp around her shoulders. She wore Dad's old flannel shirt, the blue one with the tiny hole near the left pocket that she always threatened to throw away but never did. When she hugged me, I felt her body trembling like a leaf in autumn wind, and I knew that whatever she was about to tell me would change everything forever. We sat in the living room where countless Christmas mornings had unfolded, where I'd announced my college acceptance, where Dad had taught me to play chess on rainy Sunday afternoons. The family photos on the mantelpiece seemed to stare down at us accusingly. All those smiling faces now felt like evidence of a massive deception. Mom's hands shook as she poured coffee from the pot, the same ceramic set we'd given her for Mother's Day 5 years earlier. "Your father," she began, then stopped, as if the words were too heavy to lift. "He has another family, Sarah." The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, for her to tell me it was some cruel joke. But her eyes, those green eyes that had comforted me through scraped knees and broken hearts, held only pain and a terrible, devastating truth. "Another family?" I whispered, my voice barely audible above the grandfather clock's steady ticking. The same clock that had marked time for our family dinners, our movie nights, our seemingly perfect life. Mom reached into her purse with trembling fingers and pulled out a manila envelope, worn at the edges as if she'd been carrying it for days. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Dad at a barbecue with his arm around a blonde woman I'd never seen. Dad pushing a little boy on a swing set in what looked like a backyard in some suburban neighborhood. Dad in a hospital room, holding a newborn baby, his face radiant with the same joy I remembered from my own baby pictures. Each image was a dagger to my heart, proof of a parallel universe where my father was someone else's hero. "Her name is Linda Morrison," Mom continued, her voice mechanical, as if she'd rehearsed these words 1,000 times. "They live in Eugene. They've been together for 8 years. The boy, Michael, is 7. The baby girl, Emma, just turned 2. 8 years. I did the math quickly. That meant Dad had started this other life when I was 15, right around the time he began taking those frequent business trips to expand the company's reach in Southern Oregon. All those weekends, he was supposedly visiting potential clients. He was actually playing house with another woman and raising children who called him Daddy. The room began to spin as the full magnitude of the betrayal sank in. Every birthday he'd missed because of work emergencies, Every family vacation he'd cut short for urgent meetings. Every time he'd seemed distant or distracted. It all made horrible sense now. I thought about Linda, this woman who had shared 8 years of her life with my father, who had borne his children, who probably believed she was his only family. Did she know about us? Was she sitting in her own living room right now, having her world shattered by similar revelations? "How did you find out?" I managed to ask, though part of me didn't want to know. Mom's laugh was bitter, hollow. "A private investigator. I hired him 3 months ago when your father started acting even more secretive than usual. New passwords on his phone, unexplained charges on credit cards I'd never seen before, cologne that wasn't the brand he'd worn for 25 years. She pulled out a thick folder from beneath the coffee table. "This is everything. Bank records, property deeds, birth certificates. He bought them a house, Sarah. A beautiful 4-bedroom colonial with a white picket fence and a tire swing in the backyard." I flipped through the investigator's report with numb fingers, each page revealing another layer of Dad's double life. There were school enrollment forms with his signature, listing him as Michael's father, insurance policies naming Linda as his beneficiary, joint bank accounts I'd never heard of, even a family membership to the Eugene Country Club, where apparently they spent Sunday afternoons playing golf and attending barbecues with other couples who believed they were a normal, happy family. The man in these documents wasn't the father I knew. He was a stranger wearing my dad's face. "Does he know that you know?" I asked, surprised by how calm my voice sounded, despite the hurricane of emotions raging inside me. Mom shook her head. "Not yet. I wanted to tell you first, before I confronted him. You deserve to hear it from me, not from some explosive argument or divorce papers." Divorce papers. The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire that was already consuming everything I thought I knew about my family. My parents had been married for 26 years. They'd weathered my teenage rebellion, financial struggles, and my grandfather's death together. Or so I thought. I studied the photographs again, searching for clues I might have missed. In one image, Dad was teaching Michael to ride a bicycle, his hands steady on the boy's shoulders, just like he'd done with me in this very driveway 20 years ago. The expression on his face was pure paternal pride, the same look he'd given me at my high school graduation, at my college send-off, at every milestone that mattered. How could he replicate that love so perfectly? How could he compartmentalize his heart so completely that both families felt equally real, equally cherished? "I keep thinking about all the signs I missed," Mom said, staring out the window at Dad's empty parking spot in the driveway. The way he'd sometimes call me Linda by mistake and then laugh it off as being tired. How he knew songs on the radio that I'd never heard him listen to before. The time I found a child's drawing in his jacket pocket. He said one of his workers' kids had given it to him. She turned to me with eyes full of self-recrimination. I believed every lie because I wanted to believe them, because the alternative was too terrible to consider. The afternoon sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the living room floor. I realized I'd been sitting there for hours, absorbing the wreckage of my family's foundation. My phone had buzzed several times with text messages from friends, from work, from the normal world that continued spinning while mine had stopped completely. How do you explain to people that your entire childhood was built on a lie? That the man who taught you to drive, who walked you down the aisle at your cousin's wedding as practice for your own someday, who you called every Sunday without fail, was living a completely separate existence? "What happens now?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Mom's face hardened with a resolve I'd never seen before. Now I confront him. Tonight, when he comes home from his business meeting in Eugene. She practically spat the words. I'm going to lay all of this out on the kitchen table and watch him try to explain away 8 years of lies. And then, she paused, her voice breaking slightly. Then I'm going to ask him to choose, us or them, because I won't share my husband with another woman for one more day. The sound of Dad's truck pulling into the driveway at 7:30 p.m. sent ice through my veins. Through the window, I watched him gather his things from the passenger seat, his thermos, his work jacket, and what looked like a small gift bag. Probably something for Emma or Michael, I thought bitterly. He looked tired as he walked up the front steps, his shoulders slightly stooped from a long day of manual labor. Or maybe from the weight of maintaining two separate lives. When he opened the front door and saw both Mom and me sitting in the living room, his face went pale. "Sarah, honey, what are you doing here?" Dad asked, his voice carefully casual, but I could see the panic flickering in his brown eyes. "Is everything okay?" Mom stood up slowly, the manila envelope in her hands like a weapon. "Sit down, Robert. We need to talk." The use of his full name made him freeze in the doorway. In 23 years, I'd only heard Mom call him Robert when she was furious, like the time he'd forgotten their anniversary or when he'd taught me to drive stick shift without telling her first. But this was different. This was the voice of a woman who discovered her entire marriage was a sham. Dad's eyes found the photographs scattered across the coffee table, and I watched 26 years of carefully constructed lies crumble in real time. His face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, fear, and finally, a terrible kind of relief. "How long have you known?" he asked quietly, sinking into his favorite armchair as if his legs could no longer support him. "Long enough," Mom replied. "Long enough to know about Linda, about Michael and Emma, about the house in Eugene, about everything." The word everything seemed to echo in the room like a death knell. As I sat there watching my father's double life unravel before my eyes, I realized that this moment would divide my life into two distinct chapters: before I knew the truth, and after. The man sitting across from me, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen him, was still my father, but he was also a stranger who had been living a lie so elaborate and complete that it made me question everything I thought I knew about love, family, and trust. The worst part wasn't just that he'd betrayed Mom and me. It was that somewhere in Eugene, another family was about to have their world destroyed too. And as the grandfather clock chimed 8 o'clock, marking the end of one life and the beginning of another, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The silence that followed Dad's admission stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. It was Mom who finally broke it, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her cheeks. 26 years, Robert. 26 years I've been your wife, and for 8 of them, I've been sharing you with another woman without even knowing it. Dad's hands trembled as he reached for the photographs, studying them as if seeing them for the first time. "It wasn't supposed to happen this way," he whispered. "I never meant for it to go this far." But it had gone this far, and now 3 families were about to be torn apart by the shrapnel of his choices. I found my voice, though it sounded foreign to my own ears. "Does she know about us? Does Linda know that you have a wife and daughter in Salem?" Dad's eyes met mine, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Shame so deep it seemed to hollow him out from the inside. "No," he admitted. She thinks you and your mother are my sister and niece. I told her my sister was widowed young, and I helped support you both." The audacity of the lie took my breath away. He'd erased our entire relationship, reduced me from daughter to niece, made Mom a charity case rather than his wife. Mom laughed, but it was a sound devoid of any humor, sharp and bitter like broken glass. "Your sister? Your widowed sister?" She stood up abruptly, pacing to the window where she'd watched him leave for Eugene countless times. "So when you missed Sarah's college graduation for a work emergency, you were actually at Michael's school play. When you couldn't make our anniversary dinner because of a client crisis, you were celebrating Linda's birthday." Each revelation was another nail in the coffin of our family, and I could see Mom's heart breaking in real time. The grandfather clock chimed 9 p.m., and I realized we'd been sitting in this emotional minefield for over an hour. Dad looked older than his 52 years, his hair seeming grayer in the lamplight, his face etched with lines I'd never noticed before. "I love you both," he said finally, his voice cracking. I know that sounds impossible, but I do. I love Linda and the kids too. I never wanted anyone to get hurt. Mom whirled around from the window, her green eyes blazing with a fury I'd inherited but rarely seen her display. "But we are hurt, Robert. We're destroyed." I pulled out my phone and showed Dad a photo from my Instagram. The three of us at last Christmas, smiling around our tree, looking like the perfect family we thought we were. "This is what you're throwing away," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. 23 years of bedtime stories, of teaching me to drive, of walking me through heartbreaks, of being the man I measured every other man against. And for what? So you could play house with someone else's children while your real family waited for you to come home? The words hung in the air like accusations, each one finding its mark. Dad buried his face in his hands, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "It started as just companionship," he said, his voice muffled. "Linda was going through a divorce, and I was working on her house renovation. We talked, we connected. I told myself it was just friendship, then just an affair that would end. But then she got pregnant with Michael, and I couldn't abandon them. And then Emma came along, and they needed me." The justification sounded hollow even to him, I could tell. He'd built a second family on the foundation of abandoning his first one, even if we didn't know it at the time. "They needed you?" Mom's voice rose to a pitch I'd never heard before. "What about us? What about the nights Sarah had nightmares and called for her daddy? But you were in Eugene tucking another child into bed? What about when I had that cancer scare 3 years ago and you were too busy with work to come to my doctor's appointments? I was terrified I was going to die, and my husband was playing father to children who weren't even his." The cancer scare. I remembered that. Dad had seemed distant during that whole ordeal, and now I knew why. He'd been torn between two families, and somehow we'd gotten the smaller piece of him. The room felt suffocating, thick with 26 years of shared memories now tainted by deception. I stood up, needing air, needing space, needing to escape the wreckage of everything I'd believed about my family. "I need to see them," I said suddenly, the words surprising even me. "I need to see Linda and the kids. I need to understand how you could look at them every day and not think about us." Dad's head snapped up, panic flashing across his features. "Sarah, no, you can't. It would destroy them. They don't know." "They don't know what?" I interrupted. "That their father is a liar? That their perfect family is built on betraying another family? Maybe it's time they learned." Mom moved to stand beside me, and I felt her hand slip into mine, a united front against the man who had betrayed us both. "She's right, Robert. This can't continue. You can't keep living two lives, and we can't keep being the family you visit between your real life and Eugene." The word real hit like a slap. Was that how he saw it? Were we the obligation while they were the choice? "You have to tell Linda the truth," Mom continued. "All of it. And then you have to choose, because I won't be the other woman in my own marriage for one more day." Dad stood up slowly, looking every one of his 52 years and then some. "And if I choose you? If I end things with Linda and the kids?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Mom's grip on my hand tightened. "Then we try to rebuild. We go to counseling, we work through this betrayal, and we see if there's anything left of our marriage worth saving. But Robert," her voice broke slightly, "I don't know if I can ever trust you again. I don't know if I can look at you and not wonder where you really are, who you're really with, what other lies you're telling me." "And if you choose them?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Dad's eyes filled with tears, the first time I'd seen him cry since his own father's funeral 10 years earlier. "Then I lose the two most important people in my life," he whispered. "Then I become the father who abandoned his daughter, the husband who threw away 26 years of marriage for something that was never supposed to be permanent." The irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to avoid hurting anyone, he'd guaranteed that everyone would be devastated. The front door suddenly seemed like an escape route, and I found myself moving toward it. "I can't do this anymore tonight," I said, grabbing my jacket from the coat closet. "I can't sit here and watch you try to justify destroying our family." Mom called after me, but I was already outside, breathing in the cool Oregon air that tasted of rain and the end of everything I'd thought was permanent. Behind me, I could hear raised voices through the windows. 26 years of marriage, finally having the fight it should have had 8 years ago. I drove aimlessly through Salem's quiet streets, past the high school where Dad had cheered at my soccer games, past the ice cream shop where we'd celebrated every birthday, past the church where my parents had renewed their vows on their 20th anniversary. Every landmark was now a monument to a lie. Every memory tainted by the knowledge that even as we were creating these moments, Dad was creating parallel ones with another family. How many times had he sat through my school plays while wishing he was at Michael's? How many family dinners had he endured while thinking about Linda's cooking? My phone rang as I sat in the parking lot of our old elementary school, staring at the playground where Dad had pushed me on swings just like he'd done with Michael. It was my best friend Jessica, calling for our usual Tuesday night check-in. "Hey, how was your day?" she asked cheerfully, and I almost laughed at the normalcy of the question. How do you tell someone that your entire life imploded in the span of a few hours? "Jess," I said, my voice finally breaking, "my dad has another family. A whole other family with kids and everything." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. Jessica's response was everything I needed to hear. Shock, outrage on my behalf, and an immediate offer to drive over with wine and tissues. But I declined. This wasn't something that could be fixed with a girls' night and comfort food. This was the kind of betrayal that rewrites your entire understanding of who you are and where you come from. "I keep thinking about all the times he said he was proud of me," I told her. Was any of it real? Or was he just going through the motions while his heart was really with his other kids? When I finally returned home around midnight, Dad's truck was gone, and Mom was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee and red-rimmed eyes. "He went to Eugene," she said without looking up, "to tell Linda everything. He said he'd be back tomorrow to give me his decision." The kitchen, which had always been the heart of our home, felt hollow and cold. The refrigerator was still covered with photos and magnets from family vacations, report cards I'd been proud of, ticket stubs from movies we'd seen together. All of it felt like evidence from a crime scene now. "Mom," I said, sitting across from her at the table where we'd shared thousands of meals, "what if he chooses them?" She looked up at me with eyes that seemed to have aged years in a single day. "Then we learn to live without him. We learn that we're stronger than we thought, and that sometimes the people we love most are capable of hurting us in ways we never imagined possible." She reached across the table and took my hand. "But we'll survive this, Sarah. We'll survive because we have each other, and because we know how to love without conditions or lies." The next morning brought no relief, only the harsh light of day illuminating the wreckage of our family. I called in sick to work, unable to imagine sitting in meetings and pretending to care about advertising campaigns when my entire world had shifted on its axis. Mom and I moved through the house like ghosts, avoiding Dad's empty chair at breakfast, his coffee mug in the sink, his reading glasses on the side table. Every trace of him felt like an accusation. How had we lived with someone for so long without knowing who he really was? Dad returned that evening looking like he'd aged a decade overnight. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, and he moved with the careful precision of someone trying to hold themselves together through sheer will. "I told her everything," he said, collapsing into his chair as if his legs could no longer support him. "About you, about our marriage, about the lies. She threw me out. The kids." Michael asked why Mommy was crying, and I didn't know what to say. Emma just kept reaching for me, not understanding why I couldn't pick her up. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a stab of sympathy. Not for Dad, but for those innocent children whose world had just exploded. As we sat in our living room for what might be the last time as a family, Dad looked at Mom and me with an expression of profound loss. "I choose you," he said quietly. I choose our family, our marriage, our life together. But I know that might not be enough anymore. I know I might have destroyed something that can never be repaired. Mom's face was unreadable as she studied the man she'd loved for 26 years. It's not enough, Robert, she said finally. Choosing us now doesn't undo 8 years of betrayal. It doesn't give me back the trust you shattered or the years you stole from us. She stood up slowly, her decision written in every line of her body. I want a divorce. Not because you chose them, but because you made me live a lie for 8 years. And I won't spend whatever time I have left wondering what other secrets you're keeping. As the grandfather clock chimed 10 p.m., marking the end of our family as we'd known it, I realized that sometimes love isn't enough to overcome betrayal, and sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones we trusted completely. Dad had made his choice, but it was too late. We'd already made ours. This was another incredible story from our channel. Life teaches us that it's never too late for justice, revenge, or redemption. Every story you heard here is real, experienced by people who found strength when everyone thought they were defeated. If this story moved you, tell us in the comments. What do you think about this situation? Your opinion matters to us. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the bell so you do not miss any of our exciting stories. We have new tales of betrayal, intrigue, and revenge every week. Share this video with someone who needs to know that it's never too late to fight for it properly. Sometimes, the best revenge is living well and showing that it's possible to solve all problems. Thank you for being part of our community. Until the next story, remember, every ending can be a new beginning. See you in the next video.